How's it guys, Munash here, and today we have the second war of Season 27 up against D69, and today I'm going with Sorcerer Supreme, which I thought was quite fitting because we're up against the Interceptors Alliance, Human Torch for a few energy / mystic matchups, and last but not least the newly duped Warlock. So today we're going to start on Path 5 and then switch to Path 2 in Section 2. Again, we have a high ground war, which means nothing really because the tactic is so insignificant. So first up we have Professor X with Ebb and Flow Knockdown and Power Drain. Now I gotta say that this is probably one of my worst Human Torch fights I've done in a very long time. The level of sloppiness, the level of amateur behavior was just so silly. I mean, I just kept on forgetting that Professor X's first medium attack doesn't make contact, so you can't actually parry stun him. I made that mistake fairly early in the fight, but he didn't really punish me severely for it. So you'd think I'd learn from that, but nah, I make the exact same mistake a couple of seconds later. And you know what I think it is? It might just be that I respect Professor X a little bit too much. I mean, he is my favorite mutant in the game right now, so I kind of just wanted to give him a chance so this fight doesn't look so one-sided. So he can at least go down with a little bit of honor, you know, he bloodied his sword a bit. So now we're gonna move on to Havok with Ebb and Flow Knockdown and Heavy Hitter. A fight that I've done so many times that I lost count a long time ago. Back when I was doing Part 5, almost every war, there used to be a Warlock placed here, almost every war, so it's pretty standard at this point. Just go in with Warlock and try to knock him down whenever he has protection. They do place him here with Heavy Hitter because he can't be parry stunned all the time. Most of his basic hits don't make contact, so helps being able to re-parry so you can stun him on the second light attack. And this Havok was very cooperative. I often spend a fair bit of time just trying to stun him, because he does like throwing that heavy attack after you block his medium. But this one was just playing into my parry stuns quite nicely, so it was one of my most countable Havok fights on this node. He didn't even get to use a special attack. Warlock just completely shut him down, so he had no right to pew pew. So now we're gonna move on to Nick Fury with Steady Buildup Fury, Heavy Hitter, and Power Alternator. And I'm gonna use Sorcerer for this fight, despite her not being the best for it. But she still works for it. Well, I guess any champ can work for it if you can play around the nodes and his charges. But it is gonna take a while with Sorcerer, mainly due to the Power Alt node. I just use Sorcerer because it works out better than bringing a specific counter for it. The other reason this fight took so long is because of the Heavy Hitter node. Now I know that Sorcerer does have easy access to slow, but I wasn't sure it would actually work on this node because, well, it's kabam and things can be very misleading with subtleties to the details of the description. The node states that heavy attacks are not interrupted. And to indicate this, they use the unstoppable icon when they throw a heavy attack. But what if that's all it is? Just an icon that represents this ability? Because it essentially has the same effect, but what if it's coded differently, like Dragonman's Power Charge, which is not a power gain because Doom can't copy that, or Kingpin's Overpower, which is not a Fury. In fact, I'm not even sure if it works like a buff, or at least it can't be nullified. But yeah, I wasn't sure if slow can actually bypass Heavy Hitter, because again it says heavy attacks are not interrupted. If they wanted to make it more clear that slow works, they would have said the defender goes unstoppable during a heavy attack, or something along those lines. I don't trust some of these things, so I just played it safe. However, if I had to guess, I would say that the slow debuff would counter the node. But right now, I kind of low-key hope it doesn't. Otherwise, this fight would just look so stupid, me trying to play around unstoppable when I have a slow debuff on him, just making this fight way harder than it needs to be. But still, it's not the hardest fight in the world and it's gone pretty well so far. He's about to lose his decoy, which means no more Mr. Nice Fury. However, Sorcerer can nullify Nick Fury's Fury, so he'll just be stun immune in the second phase. He won't be hitting too hard. But before we get there, just as I'm about to throw that special one, the game decides to lag a bit and that kind of throws me off and he blocks it. But fortunately it was a special one which has some pretty good pushback, so he wouldn't be able to punish me even if he tried to. But finally, decoy destroyed, and right after that I can nullify the Fury buff. Just need to bait that special 2, and then I'm gonna play very passively and let the degen do most of the work. Only need to start hitting him when he's at 30%. So just back it up, and then I just need to make sure I throw the special 2 before power alternates. Watching this fight back, I'm just realizing now that the other thing that made it a little bit long is the fact that he had willpower. And it looked like it might have been maxed, because that's a lot of health for a rank 3 Nick Fury against the champ who has max to spare. Like, check this, just from me being a little bit passive and waiting for him to give me a clean opening so I can do some damage, he gained about 4% health in those few seconds with what, 2 debuffs. But yeah, I should try to punish his heavy attack the next time I do this fight if the stakes aren't too high. Maybe I can punish a bit late so he can't counter with Unstoppable. That's if the slow doesn't work, of course, otherwise it should be a much easier and quicker fight. So that was the longest fight of this war by far, and now we're gonna move on to section 2, switching to part 2 where we first have an Apocalypse with strike counter, combat power rate, and power drain. Now this is gonna be the fight where I made the biggest boo-boo, as in I made an almost critical mistake in this fight. And it happened pretty early in the fight, so I was sort of playing catch up half the time. So I'm using Warlock for this fight, but because of the strike counter node, I won't be able to access my special 2. So I threw a special 1 there, but that might not have been the wisest thing to do, because it does remove your heal block. And speaking of doing things that are not very wise, yeah, I tried to parry medium heavy in Alliance War, a game mode where the opponents have mastery setups, and defense matters, so there is an incentive to place with maxed limber. But despite all that, I still go in and make that rookie mistake, which cost me a very large portion of my health. If Warlock didn't have that armor buff and specials could actually crit against him, and Apocalypse actually were to crit, this could have been pretty bad. But I know my Warlock, I know what he can take, I know his strengths and weaknesses, his fears and desires, so I can control him pretty well, and now you're gonna see me start managing the fight a lot better. So I was never really concerned about the fight because, well, first of all, it's Apocalypse, a champ I've fought so many times on so many different nodes. This is actually one of the easiest. I just can't use specials basically, but I can parry stun him, which I can't do on the boss node, which is where I usually fight him, and just being able to stun makes this fight so much easier. Especially if he also has willpower, because then you can actually play the fight in a way that completely prevents him from throwing special attacks, especially if you're good with reparry. But you can also just bait heavy attacks or combo enders. The main thing is you can't just hold block and let him come at you, you just need to maintain your infections to maintain the power drain. So now he's going down pretty steadily, we are in assassin range and almost done taming this big bad Paco. Although in this fight he doesn't really seem that big and bad, it's more like a medium, mildly unpleasant Paco. So yeah, despite that one slip up, a pretty comfortable fight with Warlock, and I didn't even boost for this one and it barely took 2 minutes without using any serious special attacks. So now we're gonna move on to Thor Ragnarok, aka Gladiator Thor, aka Hobo Thor, aka the Hunchback of Asgard. And he has strike counter, combat power rate, and Stung once twice shy. So again, I can't use special attacks, but at least he doesn't become bleed immune like Apocalypse. So this fight will be much quicker because I can do more damage with heavy attacks. I just used a combat regen boost to save health potions, but I still kind of wasted it. I should have probably used one less and then popped the boost, but really not a big deal. These things are quite abundant now. I was actually very surprised when Kabam made all the grey boosts available pretty much every day. I did want them to have a more consistent schedule, but I didn't think they would actually make them more available. And they're a lot more available now, which kind of left me confused, because I thought if they do make changes, they would be trying to make it more challenging, so there's a bit more to separate the top war alliances. But obviously that was not the case, because we now have tactics like high ground. Is that even the most difficult tactic? Because so far we've done 3 wars this season and they've all been high ground. So from my experience, that seems to be the one that most people are using, because it was pretty much the same during off season. So I don't know if that's the most annoying, because I'm hearing stories about untouchables and a certain Black Widow who might or might not be bugged, no pun intended. But from what I've seen, a lot of those fights can simply just come down to having the right champs. You would generally have an easier time using a solid evade counter than if you weren't. And a lot of those evade abilities are quite preventable, even without an evade counter, especially if you can just parry stun the opponent. So you can essentially face a tactic that effectively does nothing. All tactics can be countered, but I mean when you don't even need to change your playstyle, or even think about it throughout the fight, I don't know, that's just my opinion on these new tactics. But anyway, now we're fighting a Sentinel with Strike Counter Fury and Buffet. So a pretty good matchup for Human Torch. He does not need to use special attacks, so Strike Counter doesn't matter. Then of course he deals with Buffet pretty well with the Incinerates, especially if you run Max Despair, which I pretty much always do. So it's kind of like I have two sources of damage for this fight. There's the standard Incinerate damage, and then there's also some heal reduction or heal reversal from the Incinerates. And it's always just so satisfying watching heal reversal, even when it's just that one burst from a node like Buffet. Just watching him lose about 20% health as I dash back is pretty nice. Watching him gain health as I dash back is not very nice, but it's usually just a very small amount with Human Torch. So a pretty easy fight with Human Torch. The heal reversal just makes it a little bit quicker, but even if he couldn't lower regen in any way, even if you don't run Despair, he can still do this fight because you can block those special ones, hold a good amount of smolders, and then take him out with some Incinerate damage. So this fight had a bit of a slow ending. I should have just punished him after that last heavy attack, but I decide to bait another special one and then I can take him out. So that's section 2, and now we're going to move on to some mini-bosses. Today I'm taking 2 on the right. Starting with this Sasquatch who has 338,564 health. That's a lot of health for a champ who's not a boss, I'm just saying. But yeah, he is the healthiest champ, or rather he's the champ with the most health in the game. A rank 3 6-star Sasquatch has about 57,000 base health. I'm just thinking about how he would be as a rank 4, because the way these health nodes scale with him is pretty crazy. Like, would it still be practical to quake this fight without boosts or suicides? Yeah, it'll probably still be fine, but just take a lot longer. I'm quite curious to see what it would be like to quake rank 4s in war. Are her days getting numbered, or will she still be able to handle the big boys? We'll see, but either way, Torch is the primary or the go-to Mystic Killer in the game. I mean, he took this fight down pretty quickly despite all that health. I don't even have that many smolders right now, but the Nova Flames just do so much damage compared to the regular Incinerates. You also apply the passive Power Stings, which give you a nice little damage boost. So he's about to go down, just a couple more hits. Just over a minute and 38 hits, so yeah, pretty comfortable with Torch. Now we have one more fight, which is gonna be a Sorcerer fight against a Magneto with the best defense, Brute Force, Spry, and Limber. Now I could have taken this fight with Human Torch, but I actually brought Sorcerer for it because I was expecting to take it or plan to take it without the Wags pre-fight. So it's just generally easier with Sorcerer because you don't have to worry about Limber or the Unstoppable from the heavy attack. But we had a few extra Wagses or a few extra pre-fights available, so might as well just use it to make the fight about 12% easier. Approximately, of course. It actually makes the fight a lot easier if you're not using Sorcerer, but with her, it's just 12%. Don't ask me how I got to that number, the math was very vigorous. So I've spoken about using Sorcerer for Magneto a couple of times now in previous war videos. There was the boss I took last season and the one I took during the off season recently. I almost always take him on either the boss node or this one, but I always use Sorcerer. She just makes the fight pretty easy because she has the utility to counter all his annoying abilities. So I guess that's pretty much it for this one. We did win this war, so yay for us, off to a good start. But yeah, that's gonna be it for this one. Hope you guys enjoyed, and as always, thank you for watching, have a wonderful day, and I'll see you soon.